The Springer is the second of the 5 mounts that you can acquire in Path of Fire, and it's a fairly unique one in that while all the others tend to get you across horizontal distances, fields, and plains quite fast, this guy is more about climbing. So it's a kangaroo bunny mix that the developers openly admitted to wondering whether it was too cutesy for the game for a while, but they decided to go ahead with it. And its main mechanic is all about traversing vertical terrain. So it is associated with the second map where you can currently see we are right now at High Jump Ranch in the desert highlands. And I'm quite keen to show you all the nuances to this mount, because we never got to experience it in the demo. So first of all, let's talk a bit about its handling, how it moves. So its walk animation is this. Feels very gradual, very slow. We're sneaking around. Actually, watching this made me wonder if at some point in the game they do some kind of sneak mechanic where you had to be on the mount, but you had to move quietly. Mostly, this is just for flavor. However, if we decide to run, the animation will change quite a lot, and we will instead bounce around, as you can see here. I believe that the base movement speed for all of the mounts is the same, so what we're currently doing is equivalent to the Raptor, but where when I press space on the Raptor and execute my movement ability, I go very fast in any direction I like. On this character, it's actually going to lock me in place until eventually I execute a leap. So to acquire this mount, you do need to come here to High Jump Ranch in the second map, the Desert Highlands. Here you'll find a little kid who, I believe the story is their family had left them here and they're just running it on their own now. And you have to complete this Renown Heart, so you need to help out in any way that you deem fit. Before, you'll notice in the previous video I was showing off the Raptor, we could collect and eat fireflies by running over to them and feeding our Raptor as we played. On this one, we get to feed on tasty carrots, as you can see here. And those carrots can be found in any number of locations, both high and low. So there's one here at the bottom of this rock, but if I decide to climb up, I might find some more as I continue to progress. Like with many Renown Hearts in Guild Wars, obviously you can kill things as well, which means that when you're at the height, you might want to fight some of these harpies. There are also golden carrots, which I've described as being like Bugs Bunny lost in time before. I think the golden carrots just give you more progress. You'll notice that I fell a massive amount, and eventually the mount did take enough damage to die there. But another perk of this mount is not just being able to climb very high, but also to be able to resist fall damage. So you're not at constant perpetual threat of immediate death. So yeah, this is where you acquire it. You don't have to complete much story to get here, I believe. You can start the expansion and immediately run north up past the Makali outpost and just move on over here. It's entirely accessible with a Raptor. And beyond that, once you've got this mount, it really opens up a lot more areas of the expansion. So yeah, let's talk about its movement ability. You'll notice this time that our dodge meter, which is the mechanic, the resource we have to execute our movement ability, there's no longer split into 2 sections. It's just one big section. This is quite fun to look at, actually, I think. And the way this works is the longer you hold down the button, the higher you will rise. So if I just tap it, we will do a very high jump. You know, consider the height of this small child over here. We're already very high off the ground already. We will do a pretty enormous jump, and that already can break and open up a lot more paths in core tier areas. But if we hold it down, the longer we hold it, the higher we will jump. So that's about 1/3. That's about 2/3 there. And then if we charge it the whole way, it obviously takes longer, but we get some pretty incredible distances there. Very similar to how the Raptor feels like you almost have dev hacks, you're moving so fast. This can open up a lot more places that you'd never really have thought of before. So I do very much like this. There is a mastery, just like the Raptor could leap further with a mastery, the Springer can also leap further with a mastery. We'll get into that in just a second. Of course, it does also have the skill 1, too. So this is Cannonball this time. The Raptor was sucking enemies into a vortex. This one instead is just knocking them down in place. But the point of this is that you can use it in mid-air. So I'm going to jump way above this Predator, and then I'm going to use the skill 1. And you'll see I slam down on the ground, and as I slam down, conveniently, the harpy died at the same time. At any point while you're climbing around, you might be attacked, and if your mount's health goes to 0, you're dead. So you can instead turn that around on whatever's pursuing you by hitting the skill 1 and cannonballing down. I love the animation for that, before getting a big advantage on whatever foe it is that you're fighting, because they can't do anything since they're now on the floor. Of all of the combat engages, I think this one, as much as I enjoy it, is probably one of the least impressive. Just because the others offer so much more utility. Pulling things in like the Raptor can do is pretty crazy. And as you will see with some of the other ones, they also have very powerful effects. A knockdown isn't too much. But don't forget, just like we saw with the Raptor, once the Raptor is maxed out, it improves the damage of the Springer's Cannonball. Okay, and so once you've got all the mounts and fully powered all of them, Cannonball will be, you know, even stronger. So we'll show it off right here. This is probably one of the ones that I use least of all of them in the expansion. But hey, I think one of the biggest aspects of the appeal of this mount is kind of its cute factor and its exploration factor. So I've mentioned this recently. Quite often in MMOs, when you see someone on a mount like this, you might think they're just doing it for the cosmetics of it. But you will see a lot of Springers in Guild Wars 2, because a lot of this expansion, and presumably the upcoming updates and developments, will have layouts and environments designed thinking that the players have access to it, right? And so that's always something to bear in mind. Like, if you want to clamber around, you can. There is another little thing, sort of an unlisted perk a lot of people don't talk about with this mount, and that is the regular jump. So obviously, you can jump on your character, and this is about high as I can jump. When you're on the Springer, not only will you be higher from the floor, so when you dismount, you're a lot higher up. I love the dismount animation as well. That's really pretty. It sort of leans forward and kicks us off. But when we jump on the Springer, not using the special movement ability or our endurance, if we just regularly jump, this is actually an incredibly high jump, like very high. And so that's something that I think that it took me a while to get used to in this expansion, that there are a lot of middling kind of jumps that you might want to do with a bit of momentum as you charge forward. Like if I want to jump off this cliff like this, you can just use your regular jump button and you'll be okay. So like we can probably leap from this rock to that rock without too much of a problem, without having to actually stand still, lock ourselves in place, and do the whole thing up, right? So that's something to consider, and a lot of people don't sort of think of. Obviously, as we move around, we move a lot faster too, so not only do we have a higher regular jump, but it takes us further as well because of all this extra movement speed that our beautiful Springer has given us. So yeah, that's that. I guess we'll look at the Masteries now. This is the next thing to demonstrate to you all. Once again, this is maxed out. So we start off with Fortified Descent. The Springer will now have a greater tolerance for taking full damage, allowing us to safely fall from higher locations. This one's really fun to get. Next, we have Forceful Impact. That Cannonball, which is our skill 1, now knocks foes down, as I've already shown you. Then after that, we finally get High Vault. This is the one that makes us being able to jump this high. Well, we just hit the tree. The poor thing gets its head banged all the time to like that high. High Vault's incredibly powerful. And then lastly, Masterful Descent, which shares that full damage resistance to every other mount. So now, even if we were to go back onto our Raptor, the other mount, that takes the less full damage as well. So those are the Masteries for the Springer. The really important one, again, is in this third slot, and that's the one that you'll mostly want to focus on. The other thing is then dying. Every mount is dyeable. You've been looking at Permafrost again. This is the white dye. Really shows the areas that change with the dye hues the best, I think. But here's another demonstration. Here's perhaps a grey dye, which blends in a lot more. Don't forget that some dyes in Guild Wars 2 are high contrast and some are not. So some will pull more detail out and some will pull less out. And you might want to pay attention to that while you're dyeing. So here's a nice yellow bunny. Obviously, everyone's always going to go for... We got to do the hot pink bunny, right? That's the standard go-to. So this is what hot pink looks like if we want to run around in the expansion like this. Let's see, maybe indigo. We'll go Bloodstone Indigo, as that's my favorite variety of indigo. And we'll do the opposite of white here as well. Go for a Shadow Abyss, which is what you can see here. And now he looks like some, I don't know, he feels like a 90s kid right now with this hair, dude. So there you go. That's the Springer. That's how he dies. You've been looking at his idle animations. I did want to take a second in this spotlight to do a bit of a review of its capabilities. I found that the feeling of swapping on and off this mount between the Raptor and then for, you know, a lot of movement and then back to the Springer for a lot of like climbing, this happens a lot in the expansion. And my main advice to anybody who picks this mount up and will be playing with it a lot is to actually look at their keybinds and deliberately set a specific keybind to get onto the Springer. The other mounts in the expansion I can get by with, manually using the user interface to select my way to it. But having a quick key press to be able to get on this very quickly at will is kind of important, I think, and something that made the entire experience of playing with it a lot smoother. So like here, for example, this is a very classic thing the expansion will want you to do. It wants you to go onto the Raptor so that you can jump over here and then go straight back onto the Springer so that maybe now we can climb on top of this windmill or something. Having binds set up for this stuff is pretty useful. Aside from this as well, if you feel like you're using this creature to try and climb through really difficult terrain and you're not sure whether it should really pay off, my main advice would be to just abandon the attempt. I've wasted so many hours and minutes in this expansion, bumping my head onto rocks, trying to land on 1 pixel wide cliffs and things, just so that I can climb, only to find at the top there's an invisible wall and the devs never wanted me to go this way in the first place. So I've kind of had to drill it into myself that despite all the freedom this mount offers, sometimes it is best to stop for a second and think maybe there's an easier way to go, because usually there is. But that said, I was a little worried that this thing would be a bit too cutesy, that it would sort of ruin the aesthetic of Guild Wars 2 running around in city centers with all these giant bunnies everywhere. But in the end, I think it's actually been a really valuable addition, and it's one of the mounts I've used more than any other, just because climbing up cliffs and bypassing slopes, like I could walk up the slope on a Raptor, or maybe I want to skip up here, just because this experience has been such a fun one. So there you go, that is the second mount of Guild Wars 2, that's the Springer. The next spotlight, I'll be looking at a very interesting and weird one, that being the Skimmer, who is a gliding mount. I'll see you guys very shortly.